This is Judge Joe Brown, and you're watching We All Be News TV, the
News-Free Dixie.
News-Free Dixie for the 21st century.
Hello, Judge. How you doing?
I'm here, thank you.
Well, thank you for being on the show. Judge Bailey, I want to ask you a question because I know it's been a big revelation about Ernest Withers' quote-unquote relationship with the FBI as a quote-unquote informant or FBI mole. And I just want to get your take, because you was on the front lines of the movement. You also the founder of the National Civil Rights Museum, and you knew Mr. Withers well because he was like the, as they say, the Dean of civil rights photographers. So I just want to ask you, what is your take on the whole situation?
Well, I think that Ernest Withers has made an indelible and positive imprint on history with his photography, and not just with his photography, but with his courage to go into dangerous places and be there with his camera to capture events. I know that he was on the scene at Mississippi, Emmett Till's trial. I think he was kind of jostled about down there. I know how dangerous, as a black man with a camera, it was in many of those situations, and so we cannot overlook or diminish the imprint that Ernest Withers left on this world. Now, the other side of Mr. Withers was he was a man who obviously struggled throughout his different careers, financially and professionally. He was one of the first black policemen in Memphis. I remember how proud we as blacks were when Mr. Withers and Wendell Robinson and Marshall and the other blacks were hired, and my daddy took my brother and me down on Beale Street to look at them. They couldn't arrest white people. They could just hold them and call white officers to take them into custody. And Mr. Withers was dismissed from the police department at some time after that. He had some issue, I know, with the law in terms of his work as an alcohol agent for the state, which caused him a criminal prosecution. And so we can't be revisionist about those aspects of Mr. Withers. Any of us who've ever dealt with Ernest Withers over the years know that Ernest Withers always drove a hard bargain. If you wanted a picture, he wanted money for it. Mm-hmm. And I've gone to see him about pictures over the years. He's taken pictures of me and my brother over the years, and I purchased some at modest prices. I didn't have a lot to pay. I know that Withers often felt that he was not given his due credit in life, so in those respects he had shortcomings. He had weaknesses. He had, I'm sure, a certain anger within him about some of those things, and it sometimes revealed itself if you came in contact with Withers. So he was a multifaceted personality, very complex person. The business about him giving information to the FBI, I can believe that. I think that I don't think that Mr. Withers had the same high moral, ethical antenna with respect to the fundamental issues of struggle, protest, and taking a stand. But who are we to say that because one man's antenna or a compass is not the same as another's, that we have to condemn them? Yes, he did. I'm convinced provide information that could have been damaging to the subjects of his information and surveillance. I remember I came back to Memphis to visit when I lived in California and was myself under surveillance by the FBI because I saw it in my files that I have. And they talked about me going to a meeting, and they talked about who was at the meeting and the license numbers of the people attending. I don't know. That could have been Withers doing that. But as Ambassador Young said, and I'm not quite as charitable as Ambassador Young in that you say Dr. King would not have minded. I don't think that we can put ourselves in 2010 in the heart and mind of Martin King back in 1968 and before, when he and others were facing the kind of threats and vicious attacks and scurrilous activity of J. Edgar Hoover and others. So these were not incidental or breaches to be simply passed off. They were serious matters, and if they had come out during that time, I'm comfortable that many in the movement would have roundly ostracized Mr. Withers. He would have lost his passport into our inner sanctums because he would have lost our trust.
Let me ask you this, I was just reading a Commercial Appeal article. You made some great points. I was looking at the fact that it's like a lot of things that, for example, like they say he passed along community flyers from meetings, during a sanitation worker strike. He'll go to a rally, and, they said the Memphis invaders were handing out flyers on how to make a Molotov cocktail. It's like, to me, information that he got, the FBI could have really got the other informants. And also you mentioned the fact that he was a businessman and photographer, so he was on the scene a lot of times taking photos, and they could have said, let me buy a photo from you as a way of paying him as a businessman and a photographer. And they could have asked him questions like, who is this in this photo, who is that in that photo? And I want to ask you this: do you think that the information he did give to the FBI was as damaging as, like, for example, in Chicago, we had a situation with Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. Getting set up by his chief security guard, William O'Neill, who was an FBI informant. We told the FBI the layout of his apartment, and he actually put stuff in his food in his last meal to make him drowsy. So when the police came in at 4 o'clock in the morning, they shot and killed him and Mark Clark. And they only got off 1 round because of Mark Clark getting shot in the chest. Or you look at Eugene Roberts, what he did in the Title 21 trial, where he was an undercover agent for Boss out of NYPD on the counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO. Is it on that level that he got somebody killed? You think that what Mr. Withers, the boss to the FBI, got somebody like Dr. King killed?
Well, you don't know. That's the question we'll never completely know the answer to, because we don't know all of what information he may have provided. Remember that when you get these files from the FBI under the Freedom of Information Act, they black out extensive sections of those reports, and so and then there may have been things that might not have even made themselves into those reports. And so, do I think that Mr. Withers was out to set up movement leaders where they would be subject to murder? That would surprise me about Mr. Withers. I think his collaboration was a bit more benign than that, but any collaboration can be taken in the wrong hands and made into something else. You could say, well, Dr. King is going to go down to the Lorraine at such and such a time, and he's going to then leave there at such and such a time and go over to Orange Mound or Binghamton or to Reverend Cowles's. These are the people that are going to be with him. That may be innocent when he makes the report, but you don't know where that information finds itself. But I think this too, you got to put Ernest Withers' role in this in context. He wasn't the only black person in Memphis, and all these other cities that was snitching on people, if that's what we want to call it. There were people in the black community in Memphis. You read David Garrow's book, and he says that Jesse Turner and Maxine Smith and Vasco Smith were providing information. They were informants, in the words of the FBI. Well, does that mean that they were being paid? I doubt it. But a lot of black leaders in these towns were envious, and some of them were mean-spirited when outsiders came in to organize. And they wanted to see these leaders fail, some of them. And they would try to undermine or embarrass and wanted to see the white men. And that's not just then. That goes on even now. They'll go and try to talk bad about somebody black to try to put them down. I had that same kind of sabotage of me by blacks on the board of the Civil Rights Museum, who tried to collaborate with Pitt Hyde and some of the others to bring me down as the leader of that organization. Hyde couldn't have gotten control of that museum if those blacks hadn't opened the pathway for him to do that. They were on that board and opened it up for the museum to be taken over by white corporations, which now control it. They're just as much collaborators and wrongdoers. But, and I know that we never had a successful slave rebellion because there were always spies that would go tell on the activists.
Right.
Now, the thing about it is that those of us who I knew when I was down in Baton Rouge, staying at the Lincoln Hotel, a black-owned hotel, in 1962, when they put me off the Southern University campus and barred me from coming back, along with some other students, that our activities were being monitored by the authorities. I had people who came to visit me who were suspected of being communist, people like Dr. James Dombrowski, an activist leader out of New Orleans who was later arrested under sedition charges. I had SNCC activists that I was collaborating with. Ann Braden, whose husband Carl Braden went to the federal penitentiary because he refused to testify to the House Un-American Activities Committee. I have relationships, not any more than other people in the movement, because these were people who came to help us. But with that came the spies. And so, but you always had good enough sense that you wouldn't go, I don't do that to this day, say things on the telephone or write things or reveal things that I don't want the world to know, because you never know who's listening or who the spy is next to you.
That's true. You made so many great points. I mean, you use Judge Bailey, that's such an intellectual and a scholar activist. You made a lot of great points I want to get into, like what you were saying in terms of, like, I mean, talking to you beforehand a while ago about, the fact that, being a student activist, you didn't really think of yourself as being so important that people want to spy on you. But then, like, years later, looking at the FBI files, the extensive FBI files on you, they had more belief in your ability as an activist to affect change than you did as a young man decades ago. And so that was impressive. They were keeping files on you like that. And I also like to talk about the fact, the timing of this revelation. And you look at the fact that Withers' family right now is fighting, or they're fighting over the estate of Ernest Withers' photos. And the museum is about to open up in his former studio on Bill Street. And the family fighting with his former agent over control of the estate. And you talk about the Civil Rights Museum, how you were the founder. You are, make no mistakes about it, the founder of the National Civil Rights Museum, the major fundraiser. I mean, really the visionary that pushed the vision forward to manifest this important landmark. And do you think a lot of this has to do with the politics of trying to control the estate of Ernest Withers, which is very valuable? His photograph?
I have a lot of respect for Mark Pereskia, the commercial appeal reporter that wrote that story. He, as you know, has done other lengthy investigative reports during the Tennessee Waltz matters on some things under the Harrington administration. But you have to say that, to my knowledge, he's never had to do a retraction on his stories. I think he's a dedicated journalist, and you can't fault a journalist for going after a story. I mean, if it's out there, and if you're a good journalist, you want some red meat, and that's what your pen. You know, no journalist worth his or her salt is going to walk away. I mean, sometimes there's some minor things that a journalist may not want to get into, but when it's a story as indeed clearly this Withers story turned out to be, it made the front page of the New York Times, and media all over the world has picked it up. So that was journalism. I mean, that's the kind of thing that gets a writer a Pulitzer Prize. So I don't fault Pereskia or the Commercial Appeal for digging and coming up with that. That, to me, is good journalism. And I'd say that even if I was the subject. I mean, blame me that I would have left myself open. Hell, I've had newspapers, and at one time there was a group called the Fund for Investigative Journalism that paid money to find out where my funding was coming from when I was in California politics. Mike Wallace told me that a few minutes. Mm-hmm. And so was it an effort to thwart the Withers Museum? I don't think so. I don't know even that it's funded yet. I mean, I know that they're going to do something, but I know also that there's serious issues about the ownership and rights in Withers's name and photographs and the like. I remember that going all the way back several years when Withers had the photographic exhibit at the Brooks Museum, and Mr. Deaconess from Massachusetts was there, and I remember talking to one of the Withers children who was complaining at that Brooks event to me about the loss of control of Mr. Withers's properties. We don't know, at least I don't, and I don't know that they know what all Mr. Withers may have signed or agreed to, or what the legal issues are. I do know this, that unless the children can find some peace among themselves and speak of one mind, then it's going to continue to weaken any effort legally to try to get control of some parts of Mr. Withers's legacy and properties. And I don't know even with that it can be done, because, as I said, I don't know what all of the legal surrenders Mr. Withers may have made, and I don't know. And I had the impression when I was out at the Brooks Museum listening to one of the children that they didn't know at that time all of what had transpired. Mr. Withers he operated on his own, and he was a wheeler dealer, but he was no match business-wise for some of the people out in the business community that he may have been, and agents and others that he came into contact with. So was the Commercial Appeal trying to thwart the family from gaining control of Mr. Withers's properties or his legacy? I don't believe so. I don't think that mattered a whit to the Commercial Appeal. That's a business money matter between the family and whoever the people are that own those rights, and they don't have anything to do with the Commercial Appeal.
I don't agree. I was trying to apply that with the former agent, Mr. Whatever his name you just said was up in Boston.
Deaconess.
Yeah, he has the resources. I mean, you look at the fact that it's on Beale Street now. Beale Street used to be a black street. You look at the museum, the history, like you said, the corporate takeover of the narrative of the movement. That was a people's movement. And what I'm saying is, like, you look at with Michael Jackson, like the rumors about the reason why he got killed, because of his catalog. You look at the fact that any time, historically speaking, that blacks try to control their destiny, it was always taken from us. Like, you look at Negro Leagues baseball, you look at the Martin brothers of Memphis. How, it was like, they went off by Crump, right, Bob's Crump machine. And it was a kids game, but Negro League Baseball made more money than Major League Baseball. And Jackie Robinson was on the only team in Negro League Baseball, the Kansas City Monarchs, that was owned by a white man who was friends with Branch Rickey, who used to be over the St. Louis Cardinals. So I mean, it was an economic move. It was not just an ethics or moral move. It was purely economics. I'm not talking to one of the children, and somebody related to the camp from Boston made an interesting offer for the estate. And I'm saying anytime the quote-unquote white establishment is willing to pay you upfront millions of dollars for something that you owe, or own rather, that's worth billions then. If they're willing to pay millions upfront for what you own, it means what you got is worth more than millions. It's worth billions. So and you look at Sam Cooke, you look at so many other people who try to own their own destiny. You look at what happened to them, and we look at the black community, like, for example, if you was a rebellious slave, they made you the example. So keep all the other slaves in line. So I mean,
I don't disagree with you, Brother Hurt, that these kind of fights can be deadly. I don't mean to say that that people may not resort to homicide and other serious assaults to protect their proprietary interest, or what they want to be their proprietary interest. But I was simply saying that I don't think that would involve the commercial appeal. It's owned by Scripps Howard. It's a conservative newspaper, a conservative organization. The fact that Beale Street is no longer black, I blame Negroes for that. You've had a black man in this town for the last 20-something years. Well, at least you had Harrington in all those years, and then you got Warden down there, and I had a black musician that called me, and he said, Mr. Bell, there ain't a black-owned business on Beale. Well, there is one, the clothing store down there on the quieter end of Beale Street. And I had a musician call me about being mistreated. So we know how blacks are mistreated and exploited. But the Negroes let the white people do this in Memphis. I talked to Mayor Harrington. I had known Edwina Handy, Mr. Handy's great-granddaughter, who talked to me about the desecration of Handy's memory with that commercial Budweiser Park that Harrington let John Elkington put all around the Handy statue and convert what was a wonderful park that brought national attention to Memphis and national leaders down on Beale Street into a carnival-like commercial and not a very good one operation down there that Elkington controls. And I spoke to Dr. Harrington about it, called him. Well, I'm going to go look at it. You think he ever did anything about it? And A.C. Warren's not going to do anything about it.
You know, but Harrington he gave that park to Elkington for $1. I understand. He sold it to him for $1. That's valuable real estate you talk about.
So we don't have to look under the covers for conspirators in the commercial appeal and other places. The conspirators are in our own community, and we get behind them and get all rah-rah, we got to black this, and rah-rah, we got to black that, and those are the same Negroes are not doing anything for us.
I don't agree with you. I'm not trying to suggest, I wasn't trying to apply the commercial appeal, but then you got to look at the media back then, because you was around back then where, the media actually announced where Dr. King was staying at, on the room number and everything, the news. And so, the news have been conspiratorial. So, in terms of the movement,
they have in the years past, and there may be things where they
the lack of coverage of the commercial appeal, like the lack of coverage of the Clarion Ledger, and the lack of coverage of the movement of commercial appeal. And now they're trying to make up for it now, but a lot of that coverage could have got a lot of people a lot of understanding and support if they covered it.
I understand that. And look, newspapers and television stations, they're part of the same corporate control as Federal Express and AutoZone and International Paper and First Horizon Bank. They're all corporate enterprises that control Memphis.
Right.
The commercial appeal is a part of that, no doubt about it. I wrote a column for the commercial appeal every Monday morning for 7 years, from the time that I came back to Memphis in '74. Actually, I started in '76 to '83, and every Monday my column appeared. And for the first 4 or 5 years that I did that, they never questioned. I made my own decisions about what to write about, and sometimes the editor down there would say, "Well, we want you to write about local, not national issues," and I'd write something national, and they'd let me get away with it. Now, when it got to the point that there began to be questions about the stories in terms of what I was writing toward the later years, then I lost interest in doing the story, because it was a forum for me, but I had a complete, almost free hand to say what I want. Anybody who read my articles during those times. But on the other hand, when I was in California on the council in Berkeley, we had a daily paper in Berkeley, the Berkeley Daily Gazette, that was so hostile to me that anything they could do to tear me down, it got so bad that if I had a press conference, I wouldn't even let them come to the press conference, because I knew that they were no good. So I'm not looking at this thing through rose-colored glasses, but all I'm saying is that you know what the media is going to do if you do something, if they get something on you. I'm in Philadelphia as we speak, and my bags, when I got to Philadelphia yesterday, did not get on the plane with me. It got rerouted, and it took me 7 to 8 hours before my bags got to the hotel here.
Wow.
Well, then when I opened my bag finally, they had one of those "we've been through your bag" cards.
Oh, wow.
And so, you expect that. So you think I'm going to be stupid enough to put something in my bag that when I every time I walk in an airport, I'm expecting them to search it and as microscopically, hoping they can find something? You just have to be more sensible.
Like, it's good. That's a great question you just raised in terms of security. I feel kind of violated, though, if I had my bags, like, at first they lose my bags or whatever, and then they actually search me. To me, that's a personal space issue to me. I just don't find it, when you give your underwear and other stuff like that, it's kind of icky to me, that the fact that they'll be touching your stuff like that. At least it's like, what freedom do we have then? If they could
it's like a totalitarian state when they do these kind of things, and America we're more and more losing our freedoms of that sort. They say to protect us from terror, but they knew damn well that they weren't looking for terrorists going through my bag. They were looking at contraband, or something they could embarrass me on.
I'm surprised they don't got you on the no-flight list there in terms of your activism and your commitment to. I mean, I'm just surprised. But you know what, Judge Baylor, I always asked you this a question, because I mean, you was in the movement, like you was on the front lines, and I know I talked to Diane Nash. I had talked to Ben Chaney, the brother of James Chaney, one of the 3 civil rights workers who were killed by the Klan down in Silver County.
I think highly of it.
Yeah, but I told Diane Nash, I said, how naive were y'all back then to trust the FBI? Like, y'all actually used to call the FBI when somebody came up missing and stuff like that. I mean, like, you know, and now we look at the FBI as this bad, you know, organization, which is ironic to me. Like, Mr. Wooders, he's a big bad wolf, but somehow the government is absolved of all wrongdoing. We got the J. Edgar Hoover building. Of course, J. Edgar Hoover was the biggest. You know, you're talking about a dictator or a tyrant or somebody who abuses civil liberties. He's the biggest perpetrator of that in probably not history. To be honest with you, yet, you know, Ernest Wooders is the big bad guy in this story that they're running. I'm not saying that in relation to commercial people behind is being portrayed, but I look at the Mississippi Freedom Summer. You know, you had the fact that the FBI had informant in the Klan, like Viola Liuzzo, the woman, the housewife from Detroit who was killed in Alabama, you know, helping marchers, whatever, get to their destination. You had informants in the FBI that actually participated in murder. You know, and they, you know, were allowed to give them a pass. And, you know, people look at the FBI, a lot of cold cases were solved when they were committed. Like, you look at Charles Mack Parker lynching back in '59. they knew all the conspirators in that, but the system failed in prosecuting them. And so you look at the fact that the FBI had informants that actually participated in murder, working on their payroll. They knew about these things. Like they called the Klan down in Birmingham 15 minutes before the Freedom Riders got into town, or to tell them that they had 15 minutes to beat them up or do whatever they wanted to do before the authorities got there. So why are people not using it as a teaching moment to look at the abuses that were committed in the past and have been continued to be committed in the present? Why would I use it as a teaching moment? This revelation.
I know that some of the movement people, especially SNCC people down in Mississippi, would contact the federal authorities and say, "Look, we're going to head out to Greenwood or such and such a place, and we'll keep an eye. We want you to keep an eye out for us, or check back on us, or something, or we'll let you know if there's a problem." Because if you're down there and the only white people you can even hope will be your friends are the federal folks, because you know the local police are not going to do anything for you, and you really know that the local FBI, but John Doe, you will recall, was sent down to these hot spots by the Kennedy administration, and civil rights leaders thought that they could halfway trust John Doe, and that he would in turn use the authority of the federal marshals and FBI to help provide some protection. I remember when white men refused to let me use the toilet at a restroom outside of Yazoo, Mississippi, and told me to go pee behind the gas station in the ground, and then take a shovel and cover it up.
Oh, wow.
And I saw John Doe a couple hours later at a restaurant in Greenwood. In Yazoo at a hotel. I was with Henry Schwarzschild, a white man from New York, the Lawyers Constitutional Defense Committee. We'd been riding together down there to catch up with the Meredith March. And I told Doe about what had happened. He shrugged his shoulders. My point is that even though civil rights people collaborated with the Justice Department and people like Doe, most of the time we didn't expect much was going to come out of it. But you were at least trying to get some attention. But by the same token, in the summer of 1963, when I worked in Washington doing community organizing, I picketed, along with some others, the Justice Department, Robert Kennedy, because he had indicted civil rights workers in Albany, Georgia, because they were trying to placate the Southern politicians who were mad about them arresting or prosecuting some of the whites. So, you know, there is no consistency in terms of what the movement people did. You can't look back and try to say, well, how could they be talking to the FBI and at the same time criticize someone who was given confidential information? Because most of the movement people knew that we were compromised in terms of our security and confidentiality, but we were hoping. And that's another thing, and I'm glad you raised that, because then you get into a thin line between when you start talking to these authorities, hoping that they will be sympathetic and helpful, and how much you tell them and how much you may then cross that line between trying to help your own cause, that is the movement's cause, and get sort of lured into being exploited by them. So it was a very complicated kind of thing.
You know, you were saying that's great points you raised, Judge, because I was thinking about your friend, you know, Bob Zevner, a white guy from Alabama who almost got his eyes clouded. He basically did get his eyes stretched out the sockets, and the FBI was on the sidelines just looking at it. They didn't intervene in a white mob. I mean, he's a white guy, and yet they look at this white guy basically about to get mutilated. They're just on the sidelines watching, taking pictures. They don't care. So I just think it's weird, this weird relationship. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is such an invaluable teaching moment. Like, some good is going to come out of this incident with us, in terms of his legacy even. Like, talking to you and Reverend C.T. Vivian Y'all talk about the movement was transparent. Y'all had nothing to hide. Y'all wasn't planning ambushes or some type of overthrow, some paramilitary overthrow of the government. Y'all trying to just make the society better. You know,
That's right.
Y'all had nothing to hide. So what was the detail?
And there were some parts of the movement where the strategies for protection, the Black Muslim organization with Malcolm X security was very important, and so there was something to hide, not because you were going to do something illegal, but because people were trying to do something illegal to you.
Right.
I was in Bogalusa, and the Deacons for Defense and Justice, which had to take up arms and protect people down there.
Mm-hmm.
So while it's true that and then of course, you know, the truth of the matter is that some people in the movement did have some things to hide. Now, these weren't people in the civil rights movement, but I'm talking more now about when I was out in California, and when they went into that courthouse out there in San Rafael, Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson's brother, and tried to rescue or free his brother, or not his brother, but some of the three of the defendants over there, and who were on trial, and judge and others got killed. A friend of mine was prosecuted out in California, Steve Bingham. They claim he brought a gun into San Quentin prison and gave it to George Jackson, which they claim George Jackson used to try to break out of the prison, and they shot him dead in the courtyard.
Right.
So, I don't know. I mean, Steve was a friend of mine, a lawyer. Hell, I don't know whether Steve he was prosecuted and acquitted, but he went into hiding for the longest.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, the Louis Tackwood, a government spy under Reagan that infiltrated my campaign, tried to do me in. So, you know, we can think about the civil rights movement and us singing "We Shall Overcome," marching through Selma and Montgomery and all these places, but you got to look at the movement in its broader context, and it had some serious things going on.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
And you know, I went to Stockholm, Sweden, for the World Peace Conference in Stockholm during the Vietnam War, and they had delegates from governments all over the world except the United States. They had Americans, but it wasn't. But our country was hostile to the gathering. They even had Viet Cong representatives there at the conference. Congressman-elect Ron Dellums was part of the handful of people that was over there from the Bay Area with me and two or three and some other people. Carlton Miller, the black doctor out of San Francisco. Now, when I went over there to that World Peace Conference, at my own expense, by the way, the FBI really got active with their file keeping on me. You know, they got paranoid. They couldn't imagine that I would be doing that without being some Soviet agent or some Viet Cong agent or something.
Right.
And this was just the climate. Still is the climate somewhat.
I'm glad you mentioned like Malcolm X and whatnot. I mean, that's why history is a weapon, because of things you talk about. This is part of the people's history that Howard Zinn, he advocated for, the things that we're talking about in this conversation. And I was looking at, you know, like the thin line, like you say, politics makes strange bedfellows, where you got to look at Marcus Garvey working with the Klan on his Back to Africa movement, or you look at the fact that the Nation of Islam met with the Klan and met with neo-Nazi groups, the Rockwell guy, him and Malcolm had a respect for each other. Muhammad Ali talked about the Nation of Islam meeting with the Klan on several instances, you know, about, you know, they have a mutual interest in terms of being separated. And so, I mean, like, you look at this type of stuff with the fact that Thurgood Marshall had a dislike for the methodology of Dr. King and Malcolm X, like, that Thurgood Marshall had he had an understanding between J. Edgar Hoover, per se, about his stand. Like, I was reading something recently because they did the one-man play in Lawrence Fishburne as Thurgood Marshall at the Kennedy Center in D.C., but somebody wrote back in 1959 that Thurgood Marshall attended the International Police Chief Conference up in New York City. He had a meeting with police chiefs from the South, and they asked him about the black Muslim situation. Because it was around the time when the documentary Mike Wallace and Louis Lomax made called The Hate They Produced, that featured the Nation of Islam, that featured Malcolm X, and it made them like quote-unquote household names. And they asked him about what should we do about the black Muslims, and his thing was he thought that they were un-American. Like he said, you do what you got to do to them. It was like a police chief from North Carolina. I guess he told this to the Muhammad Speak, so it was open knowledge that Thurgood Marshall had a disliking for certain groups in the movement, but it seems like it doesn't tarnish his legacy as a crusader for civil rights.
Well, we can't deify these people. You know, when I'm gone, for whatever contribution one may conclude that I may have made, don't deify Diami Bailey. Don't praise me.
Mm-hmm.
You can report objectively on what you know I did or didn't do, and let history be the judge. That way, we leave ourselves open to objectively look, not just in the immediate present of our judgments about people, but we remain open to see the complexities as history reveals itself now. And that may come many years down the road, so that we don't lose faith. There's nothing about what I learned about Mr. Withers that, I mean, as I said, I knew Withers as a complicated person, and my view of Withers was complicated because of that. And I think that you have to kind of take life that way.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that. But, let's talk about another Tennessee person, Alex Haley. I had on my show recently attorney Gregory Reed. He owns the rights. He brought the rights to the missing chapters after Malcolm X autobiography, the 4 chapters that were not published with the original book for whatever reason. But come to find out that Alex Haley had ties as being an FBI informant as well, so to speak. I talked to Dr. Manny Marable and other folks that he actually was working. He was an integrationist. So, like, a lot of things, like, in the autobiography, a lot of things have been, a lot of things were not correct, factually, in Malcolm X's autobiography. And why was the chapters missing for whatever reason. So, like, what you just said, don't deify me. But Alex Haley, he has a connection as an informant as well. A lot of our people have connections as informants. But, it was like you said, the climate of the times. How do you define the relationship? And
again, Alex Haley, I must say, I never had an impression of Alex Haley as any movement heavyweight. I saw him as a historical popularizer. He popularized our African journey in his milestone work, Roots. But that doesn't mean that he was any great freedom fighter. He made a great contribution, and so again, it's a case of people who do great things, and consequently, you can call them great people. But that doesn't mean that they don't have their warts, and some of those warts can be real nasty when they're pricked.
Right.
I might say this, I was very saddened, just yesterday it was, I think, to read of the death of Ron Walter, one of the leading African-American historians and writers. I had followed him, read parts of his work over the years, but I had not met him personally. I thank goodness that I did meet him back at the beginning of the year, down in Jackson, Mississippi, at the Veterans of the Civil Rights Movement conference. In fact, we sat next to each other at a book signing. He had his latest book signing, and I was signing my book, The Education of a Black Radical, and so we had the chance to sit and chat, and of course I got one of his books, and he got one of mine. So I did. I'm honored to say have a chance prior to his passing to meet him and to share some conversation with him, and so I just say that because I was saddened to read of his passing.
Right. I know I had talked about the Watkins on my show a couple months ago. I didn't know he had cancer, but he was so nice and cordial. Like, I've been reading some of his articles over a couple of years, too, and I got a lot of respect for him. Well, still got a lot of respect for him, even after he passed to be with the ancestors. But I had him on the show talking about black politics and Obama with George Curry, the former editor of one of those black magazines. Yeah, I had them both on the show, and I told him that, I'm going to have him on the show for like 30 or 40 minutes. It's like he didn't want to get off the air. I wish I had a chance to keep him back on the air. And I didn't know that, when I heard about his passing, too, I was kind of saddened by it because he had so much to give. He also gave so much. And, the stuff he did in Kansas when he was a young man, 2 years before the quote-unquote official recognition of the sit-ins at the Woolworths in Greensboro, North Carolina, they actually did it in Wichita, Kansas back in 58. Him and some other people from the NAACP Youth Council there.
Well, Dr. Walters, he and we had, as I said, a wonderful exchange while we were waiting, because we had dead time when people were not buying the books, where we were just sitting at our table talking, and we talked a lot about the Obama administration, and we shared the mutual view that we have misplaced this hope for deliverance in the Obama administration.
You're right about that, but I actually like even closing thoughts and stuff like that. 'Cause, I mean, you're such a great narrative. I talked to a friend of mine. My friend of mine once said, "Ron, everybody should have a dark side. Everybody got a dark side. We should be able to embrace that dark side." And the problem with America is that we're too puritanical. We don't accept the whole person. We can't accept the war. We can't accept that Dr. King might have drank a little bit or smoked cigarettes or did other things, and that discredit whatever else he did. Or Reverend James Bevel, another, icon who had a dark side. His dark side is because, he did these things, whatever, it discredit everything he did in the movement, which is crazy. So you guys.
Well, there are different, there are different shortcomings that we all have, and I try to use as my standard anyway. That I try to have whatever shortcomings I have managed to the point that they're not things that do harm to other people and betray other people. But anybody who knows me as a friend knows that Diami Bailey is that I've never portrayed myself or pretended to be holier than thou. Life wouldn't be a whole lot of fun if I did.
Amen to that. You guys just add Judge Bailey before we go. It was an honor. It's always an honor to talk to you. But you the author of The Education of Black Radical. I know you was contemplating about writing a second book about your amazing life story. And I think with this revelation of Mr. Withers and other things going on, we need your voice more than ever now to be amplified and to talk about the things that you know about. So it's very important to the people's narrative.
Well, I'm honored that you called me, Ron. I've always had the greatest admiration for the work that you do and the broad vision that you have about these things. You're unique in that respect, and Memphis is very fortunate. Memphis, not only Memphis but the country, to have you doing your journalism. And I've started on the other book, which is on California. Roger Easton, professor at Christian Brothers there in Memphis, who did help me enormously on editing of the Education of a Black Radical. He and I have been working through the summer, actually, on the California book, and we've slowed down because school has started for him, and I'm doing some traveling with my law firm, but I hope to move ahead on that before the end of the year and have that book ready to go out early next year to a publisher, and it's going to be. I'm not going to tell everything, I don't think, but it'll be a bombshell anyway.
I think so. We just talked about the Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson angle, and I mean, you just were on the front lines. You actually lived the story that you that you sing about, as they say, in the gospel, they say you live the life that you sing about, and you actually lived this life. You walked the walk, you talked the talk, and you did everything and so much more. So whatever shortcomings you may have, real or imagined, your contribution to humanity has definitely made up for whatever.
Well, thanks a lot, and I'm honored to chat with you. And please call me again.
I will, Judge Bill. Take care.
All righty.
Thank you.